Well, Sam and I have made it to the Simpson... Actually, where is Sam? Hang on. Sam! Sam! Over here. So as I was saying, there he is. As I was saying, Sam and I have made it to the Simpson Desert, even though you've tried to get lost out here.
How good is it, mate? Just went for a walk just to see what was going on out there. It's just so nice out here. I bloody love it.
Find any sand dunes?
There's been one or two actually, and I think we might have a couple more coming up.
That's right. So we are here in the Simpson Desert. That is the objective of this trip, obviously, is to get out here and cross this iconic piece of terrain. We've shown you how to get here. We've shown you the gear that you'll need when you get here. But now, Sam, it's time to talk about how we're going to get across the desert.
And it's all about sand driving here. There are lots of dunes to cross, and if you get it right, it can be really comfortable and very enjoyable, not too difficult at all. But if you do get it wrong, then you start struggling and you second guess yourself, you're fighting your way up dunes, and it's maybe not as enjoyable as it can be. So there's a few things you can do to make it really nice and easy.
One of the things you can do to make it easy is drive something brand new like this 300 series LandCruiser. So we will explain some of our initial thoughts on the 300 off-road as well, because of course that's a large part of the trip. But in the meantime, let's hit the dunes. Firstly, let's backtrack a little. While our journey started some 2,500 kilometres ago in Sydney, we've made our way to the Mount Dare Hotel via Maree and the Oodnadatta track, an epic journey in its own right. Mount Dare represents the last chance to fuel up and check over the vehicles one final time before heading into the desert, with other travellers and Mount Dare's own resident mechanic having a good sticky beak at the new 300 series LandCruiser as well. The big question for us is, will the 300 series make it across the desert using only one tank of fuel? The fuel tank size has been reduced in this new model to 110 litres. However, the vehicle is lighter overall and the 3.3 litre diesel V6 is more efficient. We'll be taking some spare fuel, of course, but doing this desert crossing in one tank is going to be a good test.
There was a good chance that this desert crossing wasn't going to happen at all. When we arrived at Mount Dare, we were greeted with news that the road into the desert was closed from rain. So we stayed the night hopeful that the situation would change, and with our fingers crossed, we awoke to the announcement that it was open once again to four-wheel drive vehicles. And it's awesome news because now we can really start this adventure. We've done over 2,500 Ks to get where we are at the moment, but it is kind of only just beginning as well. The jerry cans are fueled, we've got a desert parks pass, we've got some extra water, and we're heading into the desert. So Mount Dare's behind us. We're heading to Dalhousie Springs to start with, and then beyond there, Perny Bore and the Simpson Desert proper. We'll be hitting our sand dunes, getting some sand under these tyres, and we'll be camping somewhere in the desert tonight. I really can't wait to get in there. It's going to be awesome.
On the way out to the desert, we found some time to stop at Dalhousie Ruins, right on the very edge of the Simpson. One of the things about travelling for work is that you're constantly on a bit of a time constraint. You have to get from point A to B as quickly as possible. But if you're travelling in remote areas like we are at the moment and you're not on a time crunch, we recommend that you stop and take a look at a place like Dalhousie Ruins, which is exactly where we are now. One of the northernmost pastoral areas of South Australia. Very, very remote. You wander around these ruins and you know, obviously, that people lived here, but you think to yourself, how did they live here in the late 1800s, so far from anything? And it makes you appreciate the way that we've gotten here, driving that 300 series LandCruiser over really tough terrain into a very remote area in complete comfort. And another must-do stop is Dalhousie Springs, a literal oasis in the desert. Hot water comes from a natural mound spring here, with the opportunity to swim in the mineral pool with temperatures around 40 degrees Celsius. And I almost had to physically drag Sam out of it. As you start heading eastward from Dalhousie, the sandy desert terrain begins to unfurl itself ahead of you. Expect to carry speeds between 15 and 30 kilometres per hour in the desert, but going slower will be easier on both you and your vehicle. This is a long journey, around 500 kilometres in the shortest route and over 1,000 sand dunes to overcome. The Simpson Desert is about the same size as the countries of Cambodia or Uruguay and is home to the longest parallel sand dunes on the planet. So take your time, soak in the solitude and enjoy the ride. And as the sun finally dips below the horizon, you'll be greeted by a night sky filled with the best and brightest stars you'll see anywhere in the world. This would surely be one of the best stargazing spots in Australia.
We're up in the morning and we're on the tracks relatively early, chasing that big sun up there eastward across to Birdsville in the Simpson Desert. We're approximately 1/3 of the way across now, so we're in proper Simpson Desert country, going up and over dunes, slow and steady progress. And now is a good time to talk about driving techniques. If you want to come out here and you want to be reasonably confident that you're going to get across, I'll give you some tips. Number one, turn off your parking sensors, because, just heard it then, they can get a little bit annoying when you come up near bushes and that sort of thing. So you wait for it to beep a little bit, press the button, turn it off, just like that. The first thing to talk about in terms of driving would be the vehicle you have. You want to be in something that's reasonably capable. You can probably bring a Subaru Forester or something like that out here, but you're going to be working it pretty hard, and you're probably going to be working yourself reasonably hard as a driver as well. Personally, I'd prefer to take something more inherently capable off the showroom floor, something like this LandCruiser 300 series. So far, it's doing quite well. I've got the center differential locked. That's a good thing to have. And if you've got a reasonably modern four-wheel drive, one good tip is just to get to know the vehicle a little bit before you come out, especially if you're maybe a little bit more inexperienced in terms of four-wheel driving. You might have some driving modes there. I've currently got multi-terrain select, this button down here pressed, and I've flicked it into sand mode. That changes things like throttle response, gearbox calibration, and it will also help if we get into some soft sand. It'll help with the traction underfoot. But so far, so good. This LandCruiser is doing really well at the moment. I think we have benefited from a wet season out here, so the sand doesn't get muddy, of course, but it does get a little bit more firm. So we're not negotiating the soft sand just yet, but we are going to see some bigger dunes as we head further eastward. So far, so good. The next tip, of course, is tire pressures. Once you get out here, your vehicle might be doing quite well, especially if conditions are as good as this, but I would still say lower your tire pressures for a couple of reasons, even if you aren't getting into trouble. Number one, fuel economy. If you lower your pressures, you're going to be using less fuel. And that's a good thing when you're trying to conserve every drop possible out here. And number two, actually, is comfort. Across this French line here, this is one of the more popular routes across the Simpson Desert. And with all the traffic, including things like trailers and that sort of thing, probably people who aren't airing down enough as well, the track does this sort of bouncing wallow up and down. You can probably see it right now. And particularly when you're coming up a dune, everyone gives it a little bit of throttle coming up, and it starts to rut out and your vehicle bounces quite a bit. Lower your tire pressures, and that means you're a bit more comfortable. You can look out the window, enjoy yourself while you're going across the Simpson Desert, and you've got more grip as well. So if you do come across a nice soft little patch of sand, maybe a particularly steep hill, your car will have no dramas getting up, or at least less dramas. Another thing to talk about is momentum. Now, you might have the temptation to carry as much momentum as you think you might need up dunes, especially when they start to get a bit steep and soft, but it can be a bit of a trick that. Number one, you're working your suspension really hard if you do that. You might be bottoming out. You might be asking a lot of things like CV joints and shock absorbers. Probably not a good thing. And you also might come across, especially as you crest a dune, a sharp turn on the other side, and it can catch you out, and then you've got to turn a bit sharp. You might come off the track a little bit. The trick is that you do need momentum, but you need just the right amount, not too much. So there's no shame in having a crack up a dune nice and slow. And if you get stuck, that's all right. Just back off, reverse down, and have another go with maybe a little bit more momentum, maybe lower your pressures a bit as well. But if you just run at every dune like a bull at the gate because you're scared of getting stuck, chances are you're going to run into more trouble than you would if you took your time. So as you can see, we are getting thrown around in here a little bit, but the Cruiser is going pretty good so far. We haven't had any issues with traction yet, And the suspension, it's getting a pretty good workout as we're bouncing up and over dunes just like this one. But I'm not experiencing any fade as yet. We might get some more towards the end of the day and I might report back in later as to see how it's going. But I have to say, so far, very good for the LandCruiser.
One of the most impressive things about modern four-wheel drives is how easily they transition from on-road performance to remote four-wheel drive touring like what we're doing right here in the Simpson Desert. And it's fair to say that tracks like this one are almost tailor-made and designed to be a torture test on any four-wheel drive, no matter how capable it is. Now, the 300 series is impressive on-road, we already know that. And as Sam explained earlier, air pressures, momentum, how you drive and how you treat the vehicle, and not doing anything rash with the controls, with the inputs, makes a big difference off-road. But there's a lot to be said for the torque delivery of the V6 engine. It's fantastic, and anybody who thought it doesn't have the same punch as the V8, well, you only need to drive it out here to understand that's not the case. So you have the way the engine delivers its power and torque, but then that's matched by the cleverness of the 10-speed automatic. We were a little skeptical before we started heading into the desert about how the 10-speed would perform in bumpy terrain like this, where you're on and off the throttle a lot and you're really using very small inputs to adjust your speed, whether you're going up or downhill. 10-speed automatic has been absolutely fantastic. The lower tyre pressures, well, they've resulted in really good grip and drivability through the sand. But one thing we have noticed is that the standard shock absorbers, the front ones especially, are starting to get to the point where they're a little bit tired today. They've probably had enough cycles up and down and generated enough heat. We've been at it today for at least 7 hours in total, switching drivers continuously, of course, but the vehicle's been running for nearly the whole time, and the standard shock absorbers are getting to the point where that they probably, you're pushing them a little bit too much. Could you use a little bit of extra ground clearance? Yes. Having said that though, this is a completely standard off the showroom floor 300 series LandCruiser, and it is incredibly capable, and it has made this trip look incredibly easy.
Progress so far is good, but we've only got more dunes ahead of us, and they're only going to get bigger and softer, with the biggest challenge right at the very end. Can the 300 series LandCruiser make it through unscathed? Can we do it all in only one tank of fuel? In the next episode of our Simpson Desert series, we'll be continuing our journey across the desert and showing you what you need to do to get yourself unstuck. Plus, we'll give you some extra tips on setting up camp comfortably in the desert. In the meantime, don't forget to hit like if you've enjoyed this video. Click on subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of our latest Simpson Desert content. And of course, the full written content, it's at Drive.com.au.